To truly understand the wartime leadership of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, we must look beyond the obvious, and into the shadows where the real battles are often fought. It is tempting, yet dangerously simplistic, to attribute their actions to a shared Jewish heritage. But the real story lies in the hidden fight, the covert strategies and unseen maneuvers that shape modern warfare. Focusing only on identity distorts reality, ignoring the secret operations, intelligence battles, and behind-the-scenes diplomacy that define their leadership in crisis. Their strategies are not born from a common religious or ethnic playbook, but from a mastery of both overt and covert tactics. These approaches are shaped by distinct histories, unique geopolitical landscapes, and the specific nature of the enemies they confront, both seen and unseen. To grasp their leadership, we must set aside surface-level assumptions and delve into the complex, often hidden realities that drive their command decisions. This analysis will compare their war strategies not just through the lens of statecraft and national security, but by uncovering the covert operations and secret negotiations that are just as critical as open conflict. We will examine the vastly different threats Ukraine and Israel face, threats that demand both visible strength and invisible cunning. Ukraine is engaged in a brutal conventional war of survival against a nuclear-armed superpower, Russia, where intelligence and sabotage play a hidden but vital role. Israel, meanwhile, navigates a web of asymmetrical conflicts, facing non-state actors like Hamas and Hezbollah, and countering threats from Iran, often through covert strikes and clandestine operations. Their approaches to war, from battlefield tactics to secret intelligence missions and global diplomacy, are direct responses to these unique and perilous circumstances. President Zelensky has cultivated a strategy of national resilience, using both public appeals and covert alliances to transform himself into a global symbol of democratic defiance. His leadership focuses on rallying international support, sustaining domestic morale, and leveraging intelligence to counter Russian advances. In contrast, Prime Minister Netanyahu pursues a doctrine rooted in preemption and overwhelming force, often relying on covert operations, targeted assassinations, and intelligence coups to deter threats from every direction. His diplomatic efforts are tightly focused, maintaining a crucial alliance with the United States, while using back-channel negotiations to navigate international pressure. Both leaders are products of their nation's histories of survival, but their paths, both public and hidden, diverge dramatically. By dissecting their military tactics, use of technology, diplomatic maneuvering, and the secret operations that rarely make headlines, a clearer picture emerges. It is a picture of two leaders making profoundly difficult choices, both in the spotlight and in the shadows, under immense pressure. The civilian cost of war in both conflicts brings intense international scrutiny, yet their responses, both public and covert, are shaped by strategic imperatives and political realities. Ultimately, this exploration will reveal that their wartime leadership is a testament to the powerful influence of context and the hidden fight that defines modern conflict. It is a story of how national interest, geopolitical necessity, historical experience, and covert strategy, not shared ancestry, are the true architects of leadership in times of war. The strategic choices of a wartime leader are, above all, a reflection of the threats their nation faces. For Volodymyr Zelensky, the threat is singular, monumental, and unambiguous. Ukraine is locked in a fight for its very existence against a conventional invasion by the Russian Federation, a neighboring state with a vastly larger military and a declared objective of erasing Ukrainian sovereignty. This is a classic war of conquest, a land war on a scale Europe has not witnessed since the mid-20th century. Russia's aggression seeks to dismantle the Ukrainian state, absorb its territory, and extinguish its national identity. Every strategic decision Zelensky makes is therefore filtered through this stark reality. Failure means the end of Ukraine as an independent nation. In stark contrast, Benjamin Netanyahu governs a nation facing a complex and multifaceted threat matrix. Israel does not face a single invading army but a constellation of dangers that operate on different levels. The immediate threat comes from heavily armed non-state actors like Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, both of which are committed to Israel's destruction and are backed by a powerful state sponsor. These groups employ asymmetrical tactics, including terrorism, rocket attacks, and guerrilla warfare, from within civilian populations. This creates an incredibly complex battlefield, where traditional military superiority does not guarantee security. The fight is not for territory in the same way as Ukraine, but for deterrence and the suppression of persistent, low-grade to high-intensity violence. Beyond these proxy forces looms the larger, more strategic threat of Iran. Tehran's pursuit of nuclear capabilities, its advanced ballistic missile program, and its funding of anti-Israel groups across the region represent an existential danger that shapes Israel's entire national security doctrine. Netanyahu must therefore craft a strategy that can simultaneously manage an immediate conflict with Hamas, deter a more powerful Hezbollah on its northern border, and counter the long-term ambitions of a regional hegemon. Unlike Zelensky's focus on a single front, Netanyahu's strategic map is a three-dimensional chessboard with interconnected threats that require a constant balancing act of offense, defense, and deterrence. This fundamental difference in the nature of the threat dictates everything that follows. Zelensky's challenge is to mobilize his nation and the world for a protracted defensive war of attrition. His goal is clear: expel the invader and restore Ukraine's internationally recognized borders. Netanyahu's challenge is to manage chronic insecurity with no clear endgame. His goals are often about degrading enemy capabilities, re-establishing deterrence after an attack, and preventing a multi-front war from erupting simultaneously. One leader fights a war for national survival on defined battle lines. The other manages a perpetual state of conflict against enemies who reject the very concept of borders. Faced with the full might of the Russian military, Volodymyr Zelensky's strategy has been one of masterful defense and inspirational resilience. He understood from the first moments of the invasion that Ukraine could not win a conventional, head-to-head slugging match. The core of his strategy, therefore, has been to deny Russia a quick victory, bleed its forces, and transform the conflict into a protracted struggle that would exhaust the aggressor's resources and political will. This began with his own symbolic act of defiance, remaining in Kyiv when offered evacuation. This single decision galvanized the Ukrainian people and signaled to the world that Ukraine would not collapse, setting the tone for a national strategy of total resistance. This defensive posture is not passive, it is an active and intelligent porcupine strategy. Ukraine's military, under Zelensky's command, has leveraged its home turf advantage, employing a combination of conventional defense with guerrilla-style tactics. They have expertly used mobile anti-tank units, drones, and artillery to disrupt Russian supply lines, ambush armored columns, and inflict disproportionate casualties. The goal has been to make every inch of Ukrainian land a costly and dangerous proposition for the invaders. This approach relies heavily on the courage and ingenuity of Ukrainian soldiers, but it is Zelensky's role as commander-in-chief and chief morale officer that provides the overarching strategic direction and unwavering resolve. A central pillar of Zelensky's strategy is the mobilization of the entire nation. This is not just a war fought by the armed forces, it is a societal struggle. He has overseen a massive civilian volunteer effort, a wartime economy, and a relentless information campaign to maintain domestic unity and morale. His nightly addresses, direct and unflinching, have become a vital tool for connecting with his people, explaining the harsh realities of the war while reinforcing the belief in ultimate victory. He has framed the conflict as a people's war, a fight for freedom and European values, which has been crucial in sustaining the will to fight through years of devastation and loss. Crucially, Zelensky's defensive strategy is intrinsically linked to his diplomatic one. He recognized that Ukraine's survival depended on external support. The military strategy of holding the line and making the Russians pay was designed to buy time for Western sanctions to bite, and time for advanced weaponry and financial aid to arrive. Every tactical success on the battlefield was immediately amplified on the world stage to make the case for more support. The defense of Kyiv, the liberation of Kherson, and the resilience in the Donbas were not just military victories. They were powerful arguments that Ukraine was a worthy investment for the democratic world, a bastion capable of defending itself if given the tools. Benjamin Netanyahu's military doctrine is the product of decades of Israeli security challenges, refined into a strategy of preemption, deterrence, and overwhelming offensive force. Unlike Ukraine's defensive crouch, Israel's strategic posture under Netanyahu is aggressively proactive. The core belief is that in a hostile neighborhood, waiting to absorb the first blow is a luxury Israel cannot afford. This has led to a doctrine of mowing the lawn, periodically degrading the military capabilities of hostile groups like Hamas and Hezbollah before they can grow into an insurmountable threat. This strategy accepts the reality of recurring conflict, but aims to control its timing and intensity on Israel's terms. This preemptive mindset is most evident in operations like Operation Iron Swords in Gaza, or the consistent airstrikes against Iranian assets in Syria. The strategy does not wait for a full-scale invasion. It acts on intelligence to dismantle threats as they emerge. This involves targeted assassinations of enemy commanders, destruction of weapons caches and tunnels, and large-scale bombing campaigns designed to cripple the enemy's capacity to wage war. The goal is not to conquer and hold territory in the long term, as Russia seeks in Ukraine, but to inflict such a devastating blow that it re-establishes deterrence and forces the enemy into a period of quiet, however temporary that may be. Technological superiority is the bedrock of Netanyahu's offensive strategy. Israel has invested heavily in intelligence gathering, cyber warfare, precision-guided munitions, and sophisticated air power to enable these preemptive strikes. The Israeli Air Force operates with near total impunity over regional skies, allowing it to project power deep into enemy territory. This is complemented by a multi-layered missile defense system, including the famed Iron Dome, which provides a defensive shield that allows the offense to operate more freely. For Netanyahu, technology is not just a force multiplier, it is the essential tool that enables a small country to dominate a much larger and more numerous set of adversaries. However, this doctrine of overwhelming force carries its own immense risks and complexities. While it aims to project strength and restore deterrence, it often results in significant international condemnation due to high civilian casualties in densely populated areas like Gaza. Netanyahu's strategic calculus weighs this diplomatic fallout against the perceived necessity of eliminating immediate threats to Israeli citizens. He operates on the principle that the security of his own population is the paramount objective, even if the methods used are viewed as disproportionate by much of the world. It is a strategy born from a conviction that in the Middle East, strength is the only language that guarantees survival. In the arena of international diplomacy, Zelensky and Netanyahu fight on entirely different battlefields, driven by their unique strategic needs. President Zelensky has become the world's foremost practitioner of coalition-building diplomacy. From the outset of the full-scale invasion, he understood that Ukraine's military resistance was inseparable from its diplomatic campaign. His objective was clear and ambitious: to unite the democratic world against Russian aggression. He has pursued this with relentless energy, addressing dozens of national parliaments, international forums, and public gatherings. His message is consistently tailored to resonate with the values and historical memory of each audience, framing Ukraine's fight as a universal struggle for freedom, sovereignty, and the international rule of law. Zelensky's diplomatic success lies in his ability to cast Ukraine as the frontline defender of a world order that many nations have an interest in preserving. He has effectively argued that Russian aggression, if left unchecked, will not stop at Ukraine's borders, presenting an existential threat to European security and global stability. This approach has been instrumental in securing an unprecedented flow of military, financial, and humanitarian aid from a broad coalition of over 50 countries, primarily within NATO and the European Union. He has skillfully leveraged moral suasion and strategic logic to maintain a surprisingly cohesive alliance despite the internal pressures and economic costs faced by his partners. Prime Minister Netanyahu's diplomatic strategy, in contrast, is far more narrow and transactional, centered almost exclusively on the strategic alliance with the United States. While Israel maintains diplomatic relations with many countries, Netanyahu's approach prioritizes the one relationship he views as indispensable for Israel's security. This reliance on Washington provides Israel with a diplomatic shield at the United Nations Security Council, access to cutting-edge military technology, and a powerful ally to counter Iran. However, this focus has often come at the expense of relationships with other global powers, particularly in Europe, and with international institutions like the UN and the International Criminal Court, which he frequently views with suspicion and hostility. Netanyahu's diplomacy is less about building a broad moral coalition and more about managing key bilateral relationships to secure tangible security benefits. His efforts toward normalization with Arab states, such as the Abraham Accords, were a significant diplomatic achievement, but they were driven by a shared strategic interest in countering Iran, not by a wider appeal to international norms. This often puts him at odds with the international community, especially concerning the Palestinian issue and the conduct of military operations. While Zelensky seeks to unite the world, Netanyahu often seems willing to defy it, confident that the backing of the United States is sufficient to weather any diplomatic storm. The relationship with the United States is critical for both leaders, yet the nature of these partnerships reveals the deep chasm between their strategic situations. For Volodymyr Zelensky, the United States is the indispensable leader of the international coalition supporting Ukraine. His relationship with Washington has been a roller coaster, defined by the desperate need for American military hardware, intelligence, and financial backing. Under the previous administration, he found a receptive partner, but the political winds in Washington are fickle. His entire war strategy hinges on maintaining this support, which requires constant diplomatic engagement and a careful navigation of America's turbulent domestic politics. Zelensky's challenge became acutely visible with the change in the U.S. administration in early 2025. The new leadership's open hostility toward continued support for Ukraine forced an immediate and dramatic strategic pivot. The disastrous meeting in Washington, where he was publicly berated, underscored the fragility of his position. This event catalyzed an emergency summit in London, where European leaders rallied to show solidarity, but it also exposed the stark reality that European support alone is insufficient to sustain Ukraine's war effort. Zelensky's diplomacy is thus a high-wire act. He must inspire and cajole his allies while knowing that the most powerful among them could abandon him at any moment, forcing him to rely more heavily on a less equipped European consortium. Benjamin Netanyahu, on the other hand, has historically cultivated a much deeper, more embedded relationship with the American political system, particularly within the Republican Party. While Zelensky is a supplicant for aid, Netanyahu often acts as a strategic partner who can influence Washington's Middle East policy. The return of the Trump administration in 2025 granted him what was described as rare freedom of action. He secured American backing for a hardline stance against Iran, support for eliminating Hamas, and a shield against international legal bodies like the ICC. This relationship allows Netanyahu to pursue a more aggressive military strategy with less fear of diplomatic repercussions from the world's superpower. However, even this seemingly ironclad relationship has its limits and complexities. The transactional nature of the new U.S. administration means that support is not guaranteed or unconditional. In a stunning move in May 2025, President Trump bypassed Israel during a major Middle East tour and initiated dialogue with regional actors, including adversaries like the Houthis, without Israeli consent. This demonstrated to Netanyahu that even a friendly White House operates on its own agenda. While he currently enjoys significant latitude, particularly in his conflict with Hamas and Iran, he must constantly manage a powerful but unpredictable ally whose priorities can shift without warning, proving that for both Zelensky and Netanyahu, the American factor is a source of both immense power and profound uncertainty. In the wars led by Zelensky and Netanyahu, technology is not merely an asset, it is a central protagonist that fundamentally shapes the battlefield. For Ukraine, the infusion of advanced Western technology has been the great equalizer in its fight against a numerically superior Russian force. Zelensky's strategy has relied on the intelligent integration of high-tech weaponry to offset Russia's advantage in mass. Systems like the HIMARS rocket launchers, Javelin anti-tank missiles, and sophisticated air defense platforms have allowed Ukrainian forces to conduct precision strikes deep behind enemy lines, disrupting logistics and command centers. This has enabled a small, agile military to inflict damage far beyond its size. Beyond these high-end systems, Ukraine has pioneered the widespread use of cheaper, more accessible technology, particularly commercial drones. Zelensky's military has transformed small, off-the-shelf drones into vital tools for reconnaissance, artillery spotting, and even direct attack, creating a transparent battlefield where Russian formations can be tracked and targeted in real time. This innovative bottom-up adoption of technology has become a hallmark of Ukraine's resistance. It demonstrates a strategy of adaptability, leveraging any and all available tools to create an asymmetric advantage. For Zelensky, technology is the key to making his defensive strategy not just viable, but lethal. For Israel, under Netanyahu's command, technology represents the core of its qualitative military edge, the foundation upon which its doctrine of preemption rests. Israel is not just a user of advanced technology, it is a world-leading developer and exporter. The Israeli military deploys some of the most sophisticated systems on the planet, from the F-35 stealth fighter to advanced cyber warfare capabilities and autonomous systems. This technological supremacy allows Israel to achieve the information dominance necessary for its targeted strikes and offensive operations. The goal is to see everything, hear everything, and be able to strike anywhere, at any time. The most famous piece of Israeli technology is the Iron Dome, a defensive marvel that has intercepted thousands of rockets aimed at civilian centers. This system is a strategic game-changer, as it provides a shield that mitigates the primary threat from groups like Hamas, thereby giving leadership like Netanyahu more time and options in a crisis. However, this reliance on high-tech solutions is also a double-edged sword. It creates a constant and expensive arms race, as enemies develop new ways to circumvent these defenses. Furthermore, the very precision of these weapons raises difficult ethical questions when they are used in densely populated urban environments where the line between a military target and a civilian structure is tragically blurred. No wartime leader can escape the immense ethical burdens and controversies that accompany armed conflict, and Zelensky and Netanyahu are no exceptions. The strategies they employ, while born of necessity, have come under intense scrutiny for their impact on civilian populations. For President Zelensky, the primary controversies have revolved around the methods used to sustain the war effort. His government has had to implement deeply unpopular but necessary conscription policies, mobilizing vast numbers of ordinary citizens to fill the ranks against the relentless Russian assault. This has led to painful scenes of men being pulled from streets, a harsh reality that is often exploited by Russian propaganda to undermine national unity. While the overwhelming majority of civilian casualties in Ukraine are unequivocally the result of Russian aggression, Zelensky's military decisions are still subject to debate. The defense of cities like Bakhmut and Mariupol involved brutal urban warfare that, while strategically necessary to bog down Russian forces, contributed to the near-total destruction of these urban centers. These choices represent the tragic calculus of a leader forced to sacrifice parts of his country to save the whole. He must balance the imperative to fight for every inch of land with the human cost of doing so, a burden that weighs heavily on any commander but is particularly acute when defending one's own homeland. Prime Minister Netanyahu faces a different, though equally intense storm of controversy, centered on the high number of civilian casualties resulting from Israel's offensive operations, particularly in Gaza. His strategy of using overwhelming force against Hamas, which embeds its infrastructure within civilian areas, has repeatedly led to devastating consequences for non-combatants. The extensive bombing campaigns, while aimed at dismantling Hamas's military capabilities, have destroyed vast swaths of residential neighborhoods, hospitals and schools, leading to widespread accusations of disproportionate force and even war crimes from international bodies and human rights organizations. These criticisms are a central feature of the diplomatic and political landscape in which Netanyahu operates. His government's policy of restricting aid to Gaza as a form of leverage against Hamas, as seen in 2025, further fueled global outrage. For Netanyahu and his supporters, these actions are justified as the regrettable but unavoidable cost of dismantling a terrorist organization committed to Israel's annihilation. For his critics, they represent a moral failure and a strategic blunder that risks radicalizing a new generation and isolating Israel on the world stage. This places Netanyahu in a position where his pursuit of security through military might is in constant direct conflict with international law and opinion. In the final analysis, the war strategies of Volodymyr Zelensky and Benjamin Netanyahu stand as powerful testaments to the primacy of context over identity. To attribute their decisions to a shared Jewish background is to engage in a shallow and misleading form of essentialism. It ignores the complex tapestry of history, geography, and political reality that truly shapes their command. Their leadership styles, diplomatic priorities, and military doctrines are not drawn from a common well of heritage. They are forged in the distinct crucibles of their nation's unique struggles for survival in the 21st century. Zelensky's path was dictated by the sudden brutal reality of a full-scale conventional invasion. His strategy of defensive resilience, global coalition building, and inspirational leadership was not an abstract choice. It was the only viable path for a nation facing an existential threat from a much larger power. He became the leader Ukraine and the world needed because the circumstances demanded it. His focus on international law and shared democratic values is a pragmatic tool for survival, a way to rally the powerful allies necessary to level a playing field that is tilted dangerously against him. Netanyahu's leadership, conversely, has been molded by a lifetime spent navigating Israel's chronic state of insecurity. His doctrine of preemption and overwhelming force is the culmination of decades of facing non-state actors who operate on his borders and a regional power that openly calls for his country's destruction. His reliance on the United States and his often antagonistic relationship with international bodies are not personal whims. They are strategic choices rooted in a deep-seated belief that Israel must project unwavering strength and can ultimately only rely on itself and its primary superpower ally for its security. Therefore, to understand these two leaders is to understand their vastly different predicaments. One leads a fight against a foreign army on his own soil. The other wages a seemingly endless war against an ideology and its violent proxies. The dangers of simplistic identity-based assumptions are clear. Such thinking not only obscures the true strategic drivers of their actions, but also risks fueling anti-Semitic tropes that conflate the policies of the State of Israel with a global Jewish identity, or that impose a stereotypical narrative on any Jewish leader. The truth is far more complex and far more instructive. Zelensky and Netanyahu are products of their nations, their times, and the wars they are forced to fight.